Greetings, Chris Zirkle here. Welcome to Podcast Anatomy Lesson. We're going to be learning about the different parts of a podcast. Much like we will learn about the different parts of the human body, we're going to learn about the different parts of a podcast. So let's go ahead and look at first our best practices when watching tutorial videos. This is maybe your first video with me in this course, in this format. So I want to go ahead and just run these 4 things by you. The first thing is we want you to understand the learning goal. So I'll state the learning goal at the beginning of each lesson, which I'll do in the very next slide here. And if at the end of the lesson in our practice time, if you still don't feel like you have a comprehension or haven't mastered that or understand it fully, please reach out to me so that way I can work with you. Interactions. I've built in interactions, so you're going to see things like study guides or questions you may fill out or notes you may take, or you may be asked to participate in pausing and doing something like answering questions or doing annotations, things like that. So these interactions are built into the video. They'll pop up, the video will stop. Don't be alarmed, just follow the directions, do whatever you're asked of, then the video will continue. Discussions, we have discussions available under each video, so feel free to share what you've learned, what you're excited about, questions you have, and as a class community, we can all share and help each other learn. And then as far as applying, you want to take what you learn and then go apply it. If we don't apply it, then we're missing out on the opportunity to really get our hands into the content, see it in action, which will help us to really digest it and totally comprehend it. So we want you to apply what we are learning. So let's get into the actual lesson. Let's first talk about our learning goal. The learning goal for this lesson is to understand the anatomy of a podcast, meaning you're going to learn the parts, and there are 5 of a podcast. So that way you'll be able to complete your podcast anatomy assignment, which you have, and then successfully pass your mastery check. Plus, you really want to actually produce a podcast, and you need to have all parts of the anatomy in order to post. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that anatomy looks like. First thing we talk about is the podcast show name, not the episode. We get into that later down the road. Just your show. What is the name of your show? We want it to be catchy and clickbait, so to say. We want it to catch our attention of our audience so they click and listen. We want them to understand a little bit about what the podcast is, but it's not overly wordy. And then you have the description of the podcast. So it's going to entice your audience again to want to listen and give them enough information about what your podcast show is about, but not too much to where it's a very long amount to read and very wordy. And we'll work on that. We'll look at some samples here in a minute too. We'll talk about the podcast show tagline. This is kind of optional. Our podcast show has a tagline. I've seen podcast shows that don't have a tagline. So that is something that further kind of conveys the purpose or function or the content or what your podcast show is going to be about. Podcast show artwork. This is required. It's 3,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. We'll go on that further down the road when we actually make it. But we just at this point want to know what podcast show artwork is. And we'll look at several examples. And lastly, the bumpers. And bumpers can be optional. I'll show you in a moment here some podcasts that have bumpers, podcasts that have bumpers with music, and podcasts that don't have any bumpers at all. Let's take a look at a couple of podcast shows that I produced. The first one I produced is the Williford Brothers. The name of the show is the Williford Brothers. They're trying to brand themselves, so that's the name of their show. You can see that here in big letters. And then their artwork is over here. Artwork has been made by a company. I didn't do the artwork. They hired someone to do that. But you want to have your artwork. We'll show you how to do that here in another lesson. But over here on the right is the about. This is your description. We can see more here. We can actually even see the category. Let's go ahead and listen to some bumpers. This first bumper you're going to hear has no music, has no description. Their bumper is part of their format. Is they just dive right into a question, and the rest of the show is answering the questions. Let's listen.
Hey, Lee, should I buy or lease the real estate of my laundromat?
That's a good question. We will talk about that and answer that question in this episode of the Williford Brothers.
After the bumper, they go into their show. So let's look at another podcast show that I produced. let's see, get back to the main menu here. Over here, her story. Her story is an 8th grade student of mine that is one of the schools that I work with. She's done her own artwork here. You can see Her Story podcast. She made that with Canva, which is what we'll be using or showing you how to use. Her Story is the name of the show, and Paige is her name. She's not giving her full name out of safety, right? Here are episodes. She does not have a tagline. On the right is her about. It's very general. Again, for a student, we're not going to put too much information about like where you live or what school you go to or contact information, stuff like that. So she has her description. Let's listen to her bumper.
Welcome to Her Story Podcast. My name is Paige, and as my Genius Hour project, I'll be highlighting influential women in sports and the struggles or adversities that they have to face to bring their A game.
So the last sample here, we have the top. We have Ed Tech Talk. That's the name of my show. We have my name as the author. We have the artwork here. Here are my episodes. On the right is my about. In my about, I do have my tagline. My tagline is, technology is a tool. It is not the solution. I say that tagline in my bumper and in my description. I also have my website linked in my description. Let's go ahead and listen to this bumper in conclusion. Greetings, this is Chris Zirkle. I'm a digital learning coordinator for the Wake County Public School System. I absolutely love technology. One of the first things I always say is that technology is just a tool. It's not the solution. But I do believe that technology can engage students and enhance and enrich the curriculum. So I love working with teachers on technology integration. You can find me at mrzirkle.com. So that's a look at the 5 aspects of the podcast anatomy.